Welcome back to the podcast. This is Matt Eagle from Eagle AI Agency. If you've been following along, we've been doing a ton of interviews. I think we're on episode 54 at this point with CEOs, business owners, and just in multiple different industries, staffing, recruiting, consulting, finance. So just tons of different professionals, just getting their point of view on one, business development. How are they growing the business, but two, AI, right? So I have Adam W. Barney on here. Adam, if you can, go ahead and introduce your business, and then
Yeah.
we'll jump right into the questions.
Yeah. Well, first, Matthew, thanks for having me. I'm genuinely excited for this. And, I also like your angle because it's not AI is magic. It's how do you actually make it work in the real world? And that's where I live.
Mhm.
So the clean version here is I spent over 20 years in corporate marketing across agencies, venture-backed startups, global brands, managed big budgets. I've managed over 100 million in ad spend across different roles rather, but the real version is I got front seats to how the modern machine runs.
Mhm.
And I don't mean that in a cynical way. I met great people. I learned a lot. I built skills that I use still every day, but I also saw how much of what we call leadership is theater.
Mhm.
So that's what I do here. I'm a transition leadership coach, and that's what I bring to the world. I'm also a author and a podcast host of my own podcast, which is called "Is Anything Real," where I talk
Mhm.
about reality based leadership and push corners on what's new and what's not in
That's
modern
amazing.
leadership because I think modern leadership is broken actually.
I agree. I agree. And we probably have two different angles on it. Obviously, I've been in sales for over a decade, and you're kind of on the marketing operations side, so I can see it from a different angle on your side too as well, on how you can see it differently. But I think leadership as a whole, I think it's hard to grab, right? Because a lot of people are getting into leadership with some education, but no reflection, right?
Right.
Good at what they were doing, got one class under their belt, and they think they're the best leader, right? So
Well, and I mean, it's also how I think leadership is theater, right? There's the meeting version of leadership, then there's the pressure version of leadership, and
mm,
the pressure version is where I like to come in because that's where the truth is actually learned. And I vividly remember being in my late 20s, managing a team, doing the thing everyone tells you to do, and I'd go home some nights with a weird feeling like I'm helping the wrong things win. Not
right.
always, but enough that it kind of stuck with me.
Can you define that? Wrong things win. I'm interested at this point at that one because I feel like I felt the same way, right? So
Yeah.
I kind of want to relate there.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is what doesn't get said out loud, right? Corporate
Mm,
careers can train you to be high functioning while quietly starting to erode your relationship with yourself. You can
yeah.
get really good at answering emails and looking confident while your nervous system is basically in a low grade, primal human fight or flight mentality. I think actually, if you're ambitious and capable, you normalize it and you go, this is adulthood, but it's not adulthood, it's adaptation.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Oh man, you just healed my heart just in general because of, you can't put a word on it. So you just assume it's normal and then you try to cater to the normal, right?
Right. Right.
Versus like understanding that this is actually a broken process. This is not
Right.
healthy whatsoever. Yeah, I felt that, I've worked billion-dollar companies, professional services, and all you felt every day was pressure, and you just made whatever work to make the numbers work, the KPIs work,
Yep.
and the pressure was high, right?
Right. Right.
So when you talk about transitioning leaders, like specifically, what industries are you working in, and what kind of leaders are you working with?
Oh my gosh, I work with, leaders across any realm, whether they're leaders who are new in the entrepreneurial journey, they're founders, they're executive leaders who are trying to find that balance, they're leaders who are going through I mean, I think you and I both know, Matthew, that the only constant in leadership is also change.
Mm,
Transition is the only constant. So when you start to realize and have that self-awareness that you need help through those transitions, that's a piece of it. But I think the easiest way that I can describe it actually, I one realm of people that I love to work with are those founders. And it's when people need to gain more executive capacity. That's what I
mm,
actually like to call it because it's hard if you just think about it from being in that founder corner to move from that founder operator mode into visionary CEO mode.
yeah,
That's what I
yeah.
love to help enable.
Why do you think it's hard to move into that angle for visionary? Because you can't take the hands off the wheel, maybe? Or
Yeah.
uh, how does that
Well,
look
I
typically?
think it's part of it. Maybe one way I would describe it, and this was all prioritized, life that happened to me repriced time for me, right?
Mhm.
I lost my mom to ALS, and I'm not saying that for sympathy. I talk about it a lot. I say it because it changes how you perceive time
Right.
and how much BS in that journey you're willing to tolerate. When you're watching something like that up close, I think your brain stops believing in later. Then layered on top of that, even with that $100 million in paid ad spend, I got laid off twice in my corporate career.
Mm. Yeah.
One was a reorg, the other was a workforce reduction driven by capital management. And again, it's not bitterness, it's just a particular lesson that I learned there. And it taught me something I wish people learned earlier, that being good at your job is not the same as being safe inside a system. And I think
Yeah.
once you learn that, as I did, you start building your life differently. You stop building on the assumption that the system will reward you fairly, and you start building on, what do I actually want to be true in, say, 5 years in the distance.
Yeah.
And the moment kind of hit me where I realized, if I'm going to spend my one life doing something, I wanted to have fewer layers between my effort and the real impact and the ripples I can make in the world, and
Dude,
not
amazing.
performative impact, actual impact.
What's the book called? I'm gonna buy it.
Sure.
You've
Yep. My book is called Make Your Own Glass Half Full: The Empowered Path to Optimism and Autonomy. It's
yeah.
balanced. It's not toxic optimism. It's balanced realism with that ability to act independently. And I think ultimately, actually, Matthew, what it comes down to inside myself, this is, maybe it's a shortcoming as some people would view it, but I've never been driven by outside competition. It's
Right.
always been deeply driven by an internal set of self-determination. In the past handful of years, it's been 5 years building my coaching business after that 20-year career, but I've stopped worrying about what other people think. I think genuinely I never actually did worry about what other people think. And
Hmm.
it's about those things that are inside, I call myself a transition leadership coach. That sounds like a fancy term until you actually realize that transition is basically a default human experience. It could be a
Yeah.
promotion, it could be a new team, a layoff, burnout, caregiving, relationship changes, parenting, health, identity shifts. So, it's working with leaders who are high impact, and they hit that moment where the tools that got them here are not the tools that will get them there in the future.
Yeah.
And I also don't do inspiration culture. I do what I call installation culture.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is, if someone leaves a coaching session feeling motivated but not structurally different, that motivation has an expiration date on it. An
Yeah.
installation means you leave with a rhythm, you leave with a system, you leave with a way of making decisions and a way of protecting your energy, because the systems allow that change to compound, and compounding is the real superpower there.
Yeah. That's so concentrated. It was so crazy. That's a journey that I've been on for about a year and a half. Right. I don't know if you know Joe Dispenza, but Joe Dispenza kind of restructures the way you think, the way you feel, and
Yep.
the impact. And one of those things he talks about is ego and attachment. Being so attached to somebody else and what they think, or the thing, or the success, or the. But really, what are we actually looking for is the end result, the feeling of it being accomplished, right? And then
Right.
starting from the end in mind. And I think everything you're saying is so, one, precise, but two,
Yep.
like on point, on like 100% on point, right? Because the one thing that's going to be true is everything's going to change. That's the one thing that's true. Okay. I just got laid off last week from a fractional director role, and it was ugly. It was very, very ugly. And the idea is just like, okay, like I could either let this make an impact on me, or I could just let it go, not care what people
Yep.
think, and move on to the next. And what's crazy, I got a phone call the next day because I was assuming the best, one of an opportunity that actually structures well with my business and what I was looking for next. And it's like Joe Spinach is so right. Like it's all working for you, not against you. Change is
Right.
going to happen, but when inside the flow of it, you start realizing like none of it, honestly, none of it really actually matters. For one, but two, it's all going to work in your favor at the end,
Right.
right? So
Well,
I
it's it's
100%
it's
like
it's it's Matthew. It's what I say time and time again. Like, no matter how dark the clouds might be today, it's having that confidence of knowing that the sun is always hiding behind the clouds. You know,
Right.
like
Yeah.
the first time I was actually laid off in my career, I was working for Microsoft. Again, it was a management team reorganization. I think ultimately what it came down to is my salary was actually too high on a spreadsheet as they were reorganizing the
Yeah.
team.
Makes sense.
Stepped out. It was August. I was in downtown Boston, you know, onto the subway, got home, surprised at that point, no kids, just one dog in the house. Now we have two kids and two dogs in the house.
Yeah.
Surprised the dog that I was home early, took him on a long midday walk. And by the end of the time, I went out in the sunshine and I got some fresh air. I realized this is all going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's a bump in the road, and I'm going to get back up and keep flexing that muscle, because if you just, you get knocked down and you don't get up again, you start to atrophy. You start to
Yeah.
lose some of that experience. And, I don't recommend that anyone gets laid off, 2 dozen times in their career. But when you run into situations like what you were just mentioning, Matthew, it's about how you react to it and the things that you do coming out of it. Like, there's probably, you can learn from that
Mhm.
that bump in the road, and you can be better about how you service clients in the future. Jobs that you go into or align more with what's deeply driven inside of yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what I learned from it is set the right expectation and set the right boundaries.
Exactly.
She had one expectation, I had the other. I was honest and transparent. She didn't see it, and the boundaries got mixed. She
Yep.
had one. And the one thing that I want to get off my chest, I wanted to talk about it a long time on a podcast like this, and I think it's a perfect moment. It's just funny how corporate America feels like it owns you. It owns your time, it owns your ambition, it owns your agenda,
Yep.
right? It's the most toxic thing ever. Is that if you're not working for their agenda and their dreams, they completely feel like you're portraying them, and the trust is lost. And it's
Yep.
like, oh, you forgot that I also have a life and ambition and dreams as well. I would hope that you would want to pour into it as much as I
Right.
poured into yours, right?
Right. Right.
But it doesn't work that way, which pops into that toxicity, right?
Yeah.
If you
Well,
don't,
and I mean, on the flip side of that corporate environment, I really am passionate about working with micro business owners in this
mm,
country. I've coached over 300 of them. They're 1 to 15 employee businesses, and they're largely invisible in the culture. Small business is one thing. It's not, a 15-person company is living a different reality than a 500-person company. And,
right.
micro businesses are anchors of communities. And the core problem I see over and over again there is they're not people that aren't capable and smart, but they're
Mhm.
crushed by bandwidth. So it's like the flip side to the coin of that corporate challenge. But,
Mhm.
the painful pattern there is a micro business owner is often a high agency person. They're used to figuring things out. So they try to solve scale rather with willpower, and willpower is not scalable. So they become trapped in what I would argue is self-employment,
Mhm.
and the trap sounds noble. I'll do it myself because it's mine and I care, but it ultimately leads to fatigue, resentment, inconsistent operations, and actually I see it as a ceiling on growth.
Yeah.
Then it's a downward cycle. You blame yourself. You think it's a character flaw, and it's not. It's a systems problem. And
Yeah.
when I've seen that across hundreds of micro business owners, it's again the same challenge as a leader going through transition in an executive capacity. It's not hype, it's not hustle, it's leverage.
Yeah. That's it. That's the passion I have. If you had to understand the heart of why I got into AI is to help people without burnout. Find ways to automate, find ways to build pipeline without having to spend so much money, find ways to build your website, create funnels, do all these things so that you can start growing. And at some point, you'll have to outsource to paid ads, marketing, IT teams, all these things.
Yep.
When you're a one man show, you're all by yourself. AI is a huge tool to be able to help augment a lot of those
Right.
painful things. And what's crazy is I have a couple clients that got onboarded since last Wednesday, since I first started, and now they're just so pumped about AI that literally you can over automate. I'll tell you that much, Adam. You can over automate.
Right.
But what's so crazy is they're like, man, I'm saving so much time by doing this, right?
Yeah.
And it's just been phenomenal to help people do that. And now they just want to sell those tools. And I was like, go
Right.
ahead, do your thing. But
Well, I'm gonna say something that's maybe the most useful thing I can actually say today, though. on the contrarian sort of side of that is that AI doesn't fix a messy business.
100%. I
AI helps you do messy faster. So if offers are unclear, workflow is broken, customer journey is inconsistent, it's just going to accelerate your
Yeah,
inconsistency.
100% agree with that. Yeah, because if you can't actually onboard and deliver, what's the point of adding more people to that? Right? That's
Yeah.
the idea behind it. I
Well,
just
well, and
really,
also, I'm saying this with the optimism in play there that if you install it properly, and I mean truly properly,
Mhm.
AI is becoming the most democratizing tool we've seen impact business in decades.
Yeah.
Big companies always had leverage, micro business owners didn't. A
Yes.
big company could hire an ops person, a finance person, an HR team, an analyst. A one person or a five-person business typically can't.
Right.
So AI is that digital leverage layer, but only when it's paired with installation.
Yeah. ICP has to be targeted, right market has to be targeted, plan has to be targeted, delivery, and then all the tool sets in between have to be in
Yep.
place for you to then have the right message, to meet the right person, to have the right delivery, right?
Right.
I
Right.
literally, when you said that, if you look at my LinkedIn 3 posts ago, I literally said AI can't, fix a messy process. It's literally the title of it, right? Which is super
Yeah.
crazy, right? So, but yeah, I agree, and I think there's a business consulting aspect as a small business owner. You got to make sure that all of that's dialed in before you start adding automations into it, because it's input in, output out. Meaning, if you give it so much work to do, it's going to produce that same amount of work, but much
Yep.
faster than you expected. So if your message is wrong, the automation's not right, it's going to be very, very ugly, very, very
Yep.
quickly. Right.
Well, and I think they're, just having from coached, over 300 of these businesses, I see three key places where AI gives micro businesses largely immediate leverage. One
Yeah.
is with intake and follow up.
Mm-hmm.
Most micro businesses don't lose leads because they don't get leads, or don't lose rather because they don't get leads. They
Mm-hmm.
lose because the leads die in the cracks.
Yeah.
The second,
Engagement.
I think, is standardizing decisions, whether it's pricing proposals, email responses, scheduling. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not because AI is creative, but it reduces decision fatigue. And
Mm-hmm.
then documentation and delegation.
Yeah.
AI can turn a messy brain as a founder into something a VA or a team member can actually execute on. And that third one is huge because delegation is actually emotional.
Yeah.
Founders don't avoid delegation because they're dumb. They avoid it because delegation triggers identity threat. It's
Mm-hmm.
if someone else does this, am I still valuable? If they do it wrong, will it be my fault? If I let go, will it fall apart? So AI can become a bridge there. You're not delegating to a person first, you're delegating to a system, and I think that actually psychologically makes it safer.
Yeah. I automated all of my outreach. I automated all my follow up engagement. What was crazy, what I thought was really cool was I have the AI agents connect to my Google Drive. So when I hired this marketing intern to jump on my team to help me with delivery on social media, all these the podcasts, he getting the podcast out, sort of small things. I built the SOP, made the day to day, and said, "Hey, here you go." Got him all the accesses, and now he feels clear and concise. Day one's already finished half of his to do list, which in my mind seems like not a big deal, but it would have took me forever to even figure out what
Right.
should he be doing based off my ICP and off my delivery. And so
Right.
I 100% agree. That decision making fatigue is a real thing.
That's
Um,
true. Yeah.
Anything else around AI? Obviously, you've had a lot of exposure with businesses and those things. So let's say people are fearful of AI. Let's say they're
Yep.
fearful of it. What would you tell somebody who's fearful of AI as a small business, knowing in the next 2 years it's going to be exploding at a very accelerated rate?
Well, I would actually say, I I would actually challenge that by sort of talking about the mechanism side, what makes it
Mm-hmm.
actually work, right? That's the way to give people use cases, and I think that's where most people either are scared of it or they actually mess up, right? It's treating AI or viewing it as a tool. It's not a tool, it's a workflow component.
Right.
A tool is I use it sometimes.
Yeah.
A workflow component is it runs every week. So, the way I explain it is, where does the input come from? What decision is being made? What does good output look like? Where does it get stored? Who reviews it? And what's the feedback loop? And the biggest failure point is adoption. Adoption with AI is not technical.
Yeah,
It's actually emotional still here.
100% emotional. Yeah, it's
And
all
if an
feeling.
owner doesn't trust it, they won't use it. And if the owner thinks that it makes them look stupid, they also won't use it. And
Mm,
if they think it threatens their identity, they won't use it. So the secret, I think, to AI implementation is actually identity management. And that's why I love what you're building on the agency side, because you're living in the real world where clients don't care what model you're using. They care, did it work? Did it save time? Did it increase revenue? Did it make my life feel less insane? And that's the scorecard there.
yeah. And that's where I think that I took away the tool. It's like I build a tool and sell it, right? But will people adopt it? So I moved from build and sell to education. Because the more people I can educate, the more they'll be willing to install
Yep.
certain components of it that then they'll need implementation for if needed. But
Yep.
education, I think, is the number one thing small business owners need to
Yep.
understand. Because when you got a computer back in the day, you had 2 years to figure it out. It didn't change for 2 years. Okay.
That's a great point. Yeah.
In
Yeah.
AI, it's going to be changing in 2 years before you know it. There's so many white labels out there, you won't even know where the core is.
Yep.
It'll be so hidden in the weeds that you're like, is this the actual tool? No, this is a white label to another white label to
Right.
another white label, and you can't get to the core. So what I'm teaching is the
Right.
core. Like, how do you actually build it from the ground up? So if you start buying tools, you know it might be wasting your time, or if it's overpriced, or do I even need this right now, or can I build it, right? And then be autonomous to like, how do I actually build these things
Yep.
so I can save time, money, energy, and then get an ROI on the back end.
Yeah. Yep.
The tool
Well,
stacks that you can build that people are selling for $5,000 or $300 a month. It's that simple, right? And education is key, I think, right now to smaller businesses. I have enterprise level stuff where they
yep.
know AI, they need bigger stuff, and they already know they have an IT team that wants to collaborate, like all that stuff. That's great.
Yeah.
But how do you get these people? Because the small businesses are the backbone of the US. How
Yep.
do you get these people competent so they're not lost in the dust in 2 years?
Right.
Some people don't even know what like they use ChatGPT to figure out their dinner menu tonight, and that's a
Yep.
small business owner, right?
Right.
So, but by the way, Adam, so concentrated, so high credible.
Well, the one thing I would also add there quickly though is one of my biggest beliefs about the next decade of where we're heading, and this is kind of a big thing to say, is the future belongs to people and business owners who use AI without outsourcing their humanity, right? Because
Amazing.
as you were
Yeah.
just saying, two things are rising at the same time. It's speed and it's anxiety. More
Mhm.
tools, more noise. And that doesn't help people. It's about building an operating system that can survive that pressure.
Yeah.
And AI is either going to help that or destroy it depending on how it's installed. But I think that small business owners, micro business owners, get a little bit around that corner of feeling comfortable with using AI by saying humanity still needs to be a piece of it. You can't lose that part, or
Can't
else it
lose
becomes
it.
garbage in, garbage out.
That's it. You can't lose. You can outsource initial touch for like for anybody who's interested, but outside of the initial touch for prospecting, you have to have a real human in place, or you're going to lose.
Right.
And then everything else from structure of follow up engagement, from just like understanding data and understanding market, understanding ICP, enrichments, emails, leads, all that stuff can be outsourced. But the second you need to talk to somebody face to face, AI is out the window and it can never replace it. I'll be honest
Right.
with you, I never believe it can, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
then we're just check the box and everything's just a lie or it's truth and you can't figure it out, right?
Right. Right. Right.
So, but we're running up on time. Adam, thank you so much for jumping on. I almost want to just set up a second one because this was we could have just kept going, right?
Yeah.
But if someone wants to find you or just get your book or any of that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, just wanted to give you a little quick plug before jumping off.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. People can find me on my website. That's adamwbarney.com. ADAMWBARNEY. That W is important for me. My middle name is Wellington. It goes back 5 generations on my paternal side, but it allows me to differentiate in the market a little bit. You can, of course, find me on LinkedIn under that same Adam W. Barney. My book you can find on Amazon or across any really major retailer out there in the world. It's again called Make Your Own Glass Half Full. I will also mention there I have an audiobook version that I'm very proud of. I look at it as a time capsule for
Yeah.
my two young daughters, when I don't have a voice anymore or can't do what I'm doing. at least they can hear my voice telling that story. But I'm really proud of that. And then, of course, my podcast, and Matthew, we talked about doing a pod swap here as well, is
Yeah.
called Is Anything Real? And that's available on YouTube and all the major podcast platforms. If you want to get in, it's 20-minute guest-led conversations about what's real and what's not in terms of leadership.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Adam, for jumping on. And I am definitely doing a podcast swap. Would love to jump on.
Beautiful, beautiful. And Matthew, thank you.